Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. Today we will be talking about arrays and dictionaries. I will teach you the basic and most useful functions to work with them, such as adding and subtracting elements, checking if a certain element is inside, and how to iterate through them. Finally, I will tell you about the main difference between the two. First of all, an array is a data type that lets you store multiple values in a certain order, where each value has its own index, starting from 1. If you do not understand this, don't worry because I'll talk about it during the video. For today's video, we will simulate an inventory system where there are two functions, one to show the inventory and another one to craft a stone pickaxe. So in our case, our inventory will be represented as an array containing all the items the player has. So in order to create an array, you will need to type it between these curly brackets. And between these brackets, you will need to type each value you want the array to have, separated by commas. So for example, if you wanted an array to contain the numbers from 1 to 5, you'll just type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in our case, we will just store strings, right? So imagine we want the player to start with a stick and a rock. So we will just type this as the following, right? Between quotation marks, you will type stick, comma, and then again quotation marks, rock. But of course, we need to assign this to a variable so we can actually work with it. So I'll just create local inventory. So now inventory has this array containing two elements, the stick and the rock. So that's how you actually create arrays. Now imagine you wanted to access a certain element in an array, right? So well, first you will need to understand how indexes work. So if I now just go ahead and print the inventory, you will see how in the output, you can see first of all the index number 1 is assigned to stick and index number 2 is the rock. So if you now wanted to access the second element in the list, you'll just type inventory, these brackets, and then the index you want. In our case, imagine we just wanted to see which is the second element in the list. We should just type between the brackets number 2. So now we can see how it prints rock, since rock is the second element. Okay, so now we will start making the main functions. So we need to have a function to show our inventory, right? So function show inventory, and this one for now let's just do so it prints the inventory. All right, now if we were to run this, we will see how show inventory will just do print inventory. If you don't know how functions work, you can just check out another video I made long time ago, so maybe you can understand it. So here now you can see how it printed stick and rock, our array. So that works. Now after printing, we also need to have another function which will be to craft a stone pickaxe, right? So function craft stone pickaxe. Okay, this will do something, and then we want here to craft it and then show it again, right? Now before crafting anything, we need to make sure that the player has enough materials to actually craft it. So we will need to check if the player has a stick and a rock. So in order to check and to know in which index an element is in, you need to use table.find table and whatever element you want. So in our case, table would be inventory, and element, let's just first check if the player has a stick, for example, right? So this, let's just store this in a variable, stick index, and now if we were to print it, okay, this will just print if there is an element. So if stick is in inventory, it will print in which index it is. So in this case 1. But if the player had no stick, it will just return nil. So let's just try printing this. you can see how it printed 1, since stick is in the index number 1. But if the player has no stick, you can see how it just prints nil. So now we can already okay, I'll just add the stick. Alright. So now we can just get the stick index and also the rock index. So table.find, inventory, and rock. Okay. So now to check if the player actually has them, we'll just use a conditional, right? So if stick index is not nil and the rock index is not nil, then we would craft a stone pickaxe. But if it lacks of either of these elements, we will just print player has. Okay. So now this will really just, if it has enough materials, it will craft the stone pickaxe. But if the player doesn't have it, it will just print player doesn't have enough materials. So now, in order to craft the stone pickaxe, we would need to add and remove elements from this array, right? So we have multiple ways to do this, but in my case, I prefer first to do what we will still print. I will first need to add the stone pickaxe to the player's inventory. So in order to add an element to an array, you need to use table.insert, then pass the table, then the element. Right? So in our case, our table will be in the inventory, since we want to add the stone pickaxe to the inventory. And then the element we will be adding will be a string, which will contain stone pickaxe. Okay, now, if we try running this, we will see how, since the player has enough materials, first its inventory will be a stick and a rock, it will craft a stone pickaxe, and then have a stick and a rock and a stone pickaxe. Okay, so we can see how this works, but now we have to remove the stick and the rock after crafting the stone pickaxe. Now to remove the stick and the rock, you have to use table.remove. So table.remove will let you remove whichever element is in a certain index in an array. So table.remove, you need to pass the table and then the index. So for example, in our case, a table will be inventory, and the index of our element could be stick index. For example, we can just remove first of all the stick. So now if we were just to do this, you will see something interesting. So first of all, stick and the rock, it crafts the stone pickaxe, and then you can see how it has a rock and a stone pickaxe, so it did remove the stick. But we have to take into consideration the fact that before the rock was in index number 2. But now after removing the stick, since stick was in position number 1, the rock went from position number 2 to number 1. So now rock is number 1 and stone pickaxe number 2. So you can see how sometimes the rock index can change, but imagine if the rock was the first one, then the stick index wouldn't change. So now we first remove the stick index, but we want to get the rock index once again to make sure we are getting the right index, right? So we will just update this variable rock index to be table.find inventory rock. So now that we are sure that the rock index is the correct index, we can just do table.remove from inventory the rock index. So now imagine the player tried to craft another stone pickaxe, and then we'll show the inventory once again. So now if we do this, we'll see how first of all the player has a stick and a rock, it crafts one stone pickaxe, and after crafting it, the player only has a stone pickaxe. Then it tries to craft it again, but the player doesn't have enough materials, so the inventory will stay the same. Now imagine if the player has first of all a rock, then another rock, and then a stick. Now, if we were to run this, we will see how, first of all, it has a rock and a rock, well, two rocks and a stick. It crafts one stone pickaxe, and then it's left with one rock and a stone pickaxe. And then it tries to craft it again, but since the player doesn't have enough materials, since it doesn't have any stick, the inventory will stay the same with a rock and a stone pickaxe. So you can see how this does work, and the main table functions we used here is table.find, which will return either nil or the index of the element you are looking for, table.insert to append, to add an element to the end of an array, and table.remove to remove whichever element is in a certain index, right? So we also have to remember we also have to remember that an element's index can change after removing an element from the array. Okay, so now that we have this craft stone pickaxe, we can now try to improve this show inventory function, right? So I'll just reset here the output. Okay, so now since we will only be working with this show inventory function, I'll just remove here this craft stone pickaxe, and the code will now only run this show inventory function only once. That's it. So imagine we want, in this case, we will show this inventory iterating through the array. So you can just do for I in inventory. It doesn't have to be I, it could just be index, but I just use I because it stands for index. So now if we were to print this, so for I in whichever table we want, in our case inventory, we can just do whatever thing we want. So if we want to print I, we will see how now it prints 1, 2, and 3. This is because number 1, it just prints the indexes of each element, right? So since we have 3 elements, it printed 1, 2, and 3. Now we could just do inventory in between brackets I, and this will just show rock, and stick, because as I told you before, to access an element in an array you have to type it between brackets. But there is an easier way to do this, and that will just doing for I, for index, value in pairs inventory. So now we could just do for I, b, right? So in this case, for in pairs, what pairs will do is that I will be assigned the index, but value will be assigned the value corresponding to that index. So if now we print I and then print b, you can see how it prints. In position number 1 there is the rock, number 2 another rock, and then finally in the number 3 a stick. So that would be how to iterate through an array. But if we wanted to actually print the inventory in a better way, we could just do print b, right? So to only print the element the player has, and now it will just print rock. In this case it will print it twice, so we can see we have 2 rocks and a stick. Okay, so that will be how to, here this will be a basic system, a basic inventory system with 2 basic functions, one to show the inventory and another one to craft a stone pickaxe. And within this inventory, within this system, we learned how to find elements in an array, inserting elements, removing elements, accessing elements in a certain index, and also how to iterate through an array. Okay, now that we have all this system working, I need to tell you one more thing, which is how to actually get the length of an array. So to do this, you have to type hash and then whichever table you want check. Well, in this case array, right, which will be inventory. Now if we print this, you will see how it will print 3, since the inventory has one rock, and a stick, so 3 elements. See, number 3. So that will be everything for the arrays. So now we will do the same system but using dictionaries, so it will be a little bit better. So